Without further ado, Doc.
Hey guys, well, I am a member of Trava. For this demonstration, I'm also a member of the National Alliance of Interpreters. I am a certified interpreter. That means that I have actually gone through additional training outside of blacksmithing to actually work exhibits at museums, talk to people at museums and things like that. During that training, I came up with this right here, the infamous ice forge. Anybody who has been to one of our events and seen me set this up, they will tell you families love this thing, mainly because when we do interpretation and museum exhibit work, what we like people to do is to touch the science or touch the history. This gives them a chance to do that. Otherwise, the only other way I've got it, and I'm gonna have Chuck act as my apprentice and make sure this hammer, this is my favorite hammer, gets back to me. And then someone may have to make sure I put it in my car because I keep forgetting to do that. And I have to hand that off or hand a piece of steel off and tell them, you feel that hammer? That's how much weight a blacksmith would have to do back in the 1800s. He'd have to swing all day. It works, it gets their hands on it, but not as well as taking an old technique that the first person who tried to teach me blacksmithing, Jorge Bandera, did, which is clay work. Clay work is used by blacksmiths quite often. If we're trying to figure out how to actually do a technique, we're trying to figure out a new technique, or we're trying a new technique we saw online, you can actually use clay if you get it cold enough in place of steel. That way you can try 100, 1,000 times, and all you gotta do is ball up and reshape that clay and then refreeze it. But as an exhibit piece, 40 pounds of ice, as close as you can get. I have taken pictures of all the measurements I wrote on the side of this thing, and I will get them over to Rufus to get up on the community around the anvil. So if y'all ever wanted to build one yourself, y'all could. All this is 1x6s and 3/4 inch plywood. And then I got some basic service pots that I can then set here. Biggest thing you have to do working this exhibit, you want the clay to get cold, you want it to stay cold. Basically, you want to get clay down close to 32 degrees Fahrenheit, as close as possible, or colder, because when it's properly cold, and you give the clay a feel, it's literally as stiff and as hard as our steel is when we pull it out of the fire. It's got one advantage. Remember I said when we're doing museum exhibits, we want people to be able to touch the science, touch the history, touch that heritage as much as possible. If I was passing a hot piece of steel ready for me to forge around a group of people, is that gonna fly? No. We're talking about up to 1,000 degrees worth of steel, whereas if I'm passing this, I can simply take, and I would then tell them when I'm ready to start the demo, I tell them, all right, I've got little hands for little hammers, I've got some clay here in this ice. Monkey see, monkey do. That is the... Slow down. One of the things I tell people to, one of the things you will always hear me at a demonstration, Rob kind of got annoyed by it when I was trying to teach the class a month or so ago. You will hear me say the term monkey see, monkey do, mainly because all of blacksmithing, when we teach a blacksmithing course, all we're really doing is having them look at what the person teaching it does, and then having them do it. That's all it is. So all I'm doing is, because I'm dealing with 4, 5, 14 and below people when I'm doing this ice forge, I'm telling them, monkey see, monkey do, watch what I do, and then you do it. And I will do simply drawing a point. That's it. I don't worry about a hook. I don't worry about am I making a spoon or anything like that. I am just simply taking them through the process to draw a point. And I will tell them, go tap, tap, 90, tap, 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 back and forth, tap, tap. And I'd ask them, just simply do that and look at what the clay is doing. Now, when you're using the ice forge, biggest thing you've got to keep in mind is it takes 5 to 10 minutes when you put these in. The ice forge, that have, as I've got it set up, I can do up to 8 people in here. So I'll put 8 pieces of clay, about 1/8 of an inch diameter, and this is simple plasticine clay. And I make sure I get enough of this clay into the ice to where as people come through, they hand me the clay that they've used, because it's going to be back up to ambient temperature. I can drop that down into the side or into another one of these buckets. I can let it start to cool down. That way I can keep a continuous level of this clay coming back to me for the next people that are going to do the exhibit. As always, with the type of exhibit demonstration that I normally do, this is where we've gotten to the point where questions. Go ahead.
Well, tell me about your outfit.
All right. My outfit is based off of a guy named John Shields. John Shields was one of our forefathers as a blacksmith. Most of y'all may not have heard of him, but you have heard of his boss. And this was actually a picture drawn by his boss, Meriwether Lewis of Lewis and Clark. John Shields was the senior blacksmith on the Lewis and Clark expedition. We often talk about the king of the trades at the end of the class. This guy actually did exhibit that little short story we're known for telling people, because this guy, no matter what the expedition needed, he made happen. And this is an expedition where they talked about them burying the forge 4 times. And they had a single requisition for forge equipment. So when Meriwether Lewis said the ingenuity of this man, we're talking about a guy that, if we want to live up to the people who actually defined blacksmithing in America, back when America first started, we got to figure out how do you take and make a forge in the middle of the wilderness 3 times. Because he made it in Louisville, and then 3 times he buried, 2 other times he buried that one, then he buried it 2 more times, and he had a 4th forge coming back just to maintain the equipment. And it's actually important when I'm doing exhibit work. Yes, I dress in this costume anytime I'm at a museum. It helps get people involved, get their attention. It helps with them emerging into what I'm doing. Any other questions?
Just one little comment. You know, the President of the United States commissioned Lewis and Clark to go on what was termed the Voyage of Discovery. So one of them had military experience and one not so much. But at that time, the blacksmith was such an integral part of the ability to do the Voyage of Discovery that we now know as the Lewis and Clark expedition, that they didn't risk taking a blacksmith. They took backup blacksmiths because they knew this whole thing would fail if they lost a blacksmith. So that's just.
Yeah, 3 blacksmiths. They took 3 of them. One of them actually did commit an act of treason and got sent back. So yes, they took 3 spares. Fortunately, it wasn't their most senior one. How important was a blacksmith to it, to add to what Chuck said? Everybody on the Lewis and Clark expedition, except for Meriwether Lewis and William Clark, was to be single. John Shields was married, which when you look at the history patterns of blacksmiths, that means he was a master smith. He had a blacksmith shop. But it was so important to have an experienced blacksmith on this expedition, they took John Shields. Any other questions? All right, to sum it up. Everything you have just seen me do, where I keep asking y'all any questions, it is a set procedure to get people to spark and what I call forging curiosity into people who come to your demos, who come to your exhibits. I don't do a whole lot of fancy blacksmithing techniques as an exhibit blacksmith. I'll make a hook. I'll draw a point. Most of the time, I just take a piece of 1/4-inch steel and I'll pass it around to the people there. And I'll tell them to try to Superman bend that steel. And then I'll heat the steel up, put it in my leg vise, and bend it. That's all it takes to spark curiosity. It doesn't take a whole lot of advanced techniques and flashy stuff. It just takes getting their hands on that material when you go in an exhibit. And again, biggest reason why I am a big proponent of blacksmiths using clay, not just as for the ice forge, still costs you money. 100 times with a single piece of clay as opposed to 100 pieces of steel having to redo something because you're trying to figure out how you do a new piece or trying to figure out a new technique. I can't tell you how many times I will use clay before, when I'm doing personal blacksmith projects away from exhibits, I will use this clay before I will fire up my forge and heat up the steel. Because that way I know the process. If I want to change how I make a hook, I do it in clay first. If I want to figure out the spoon y'all seen me put up, y'all notice I did that in clay first. I saw YouTube videos on how to make a spoon, but I practiced it in clay first before I forged the spoon. That way, 1 piece of steel or 2 pieces of steel as opposed to, oh great, I got that wrong, I gotta start over. So, as a blacksmith, I do encourage you, use clay. It helps.
Can I add to that?
Go ahead.
There's a lot of applications for this ice forge. We were kind of surprised when it first came out, but after it did, you can have it in different events. So as far as like how that makes you pick his home place, you can keep kids busy while you're entertaining the parents and telling them history stuff and everything else. But also, if you have somebody that's interested, whether it's kids, adults, or whatever else, you can take them through the first class of making a hook in less than 5 minutes, and they can do it themselves. That shows them that they're capable of being a blacksmith. Just that quick. You can teach them that class. But granted, the class is a lot more when you use the steel, you use the fire, everything else, and safety. But that right there, I've been able to teach plenty of people how to make a hook in like less than 5 minutes, and they're like, wow. So yeah, it's not as difficult as you think, and everybody can do it. No matter what your age, sex, whatever, anything else. And that shows that. So it has different applications where you can use it at as well. So if you can pay attention to whether the person's just interested in the history part of it, or if they're actually interested in blacksmithing, and they're like, or they're reserved and don't think they can do it, you can show them and allow them to do it beforehand. And that also adds, at our events, something people can put their hands on, which last year or the year before, we learned how to do the swords out of the duplex now. So if they do this prior to going to do that duplex now, it helps him not get hit as much. Because they learn a little bit of hammer control. So they learned a little bit before they went and actually forged a piece of metal. Or ran a cold metal, they still did it. And it keeps them engaged, it keeps them around longer, it keeps them looking at our table. So we have more stuff at the table. And let them know that this is all donation to our group. It all plays in a circle together. So it's an added piece that people can put their hands on, and it also trails and keeps the kids there longer, which also keeps the parents there longer. And it draws that interest. So that thing really has done a lot. When it first came out, we were all like, what in the world is that going to brought out now? But that first day, me and him were solid busy that whole 6-8 hours railing on that thing.
By the way, 40 pounds of ice, the only thing I did not cover because we're under a covered structure, 40 pounds of ice can last about 9-ish hours if it's under cover. If this thing's out in the sun, it's going, depending on the temperature outside, it's going to go down fast, and next thing you know, you're standing in a puddle of water and mud. Wiggly. Fortunately, I haven't, the times I've used it so far, I've only had it turn completely to water one time. And yes, it was out in the sun when it happened.
So if anybody has any ideas of making that better or holding ice better or whatever else, we can always add to it.
The wood it's made out of is the only insulation it's got.
So if we take that to guys again, we really have some
But I just wanted to add that. There's
Oh,
a lot
yeah.
of application to it. There's a lot of use to it. There's a lot of things that it does, not just that.
That's like events where we can't set up before, this would be one of them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even at that graphic thing, if we can't set it before, I don't know if we can do this, but just as an idea of something like that, where we can't set it before, where all we have is full force, we can't use a full force forever. It does have an application to where people put their hands and stuff.
Well, at this point, usually I would be calling people up to try it.
Who has kids? In this group, who has kids? Okay, who has grandkids? How easy is it to keep them occupied for more than 3.5 minutes? This will get you 5 to 10.
I've had kids stay at this thing for up to an hour, literally just coming back around.
Until you see it operating at an event we're doing, you don't realize it changes a lot of the game plan.
It's this week. When it first came out, I was.
It has the ability to occupy adults and children. If you're a parent, husband and wife, grandma, grandpa, and you've got 3 grandkids with you, and you're dragging them through some place that they do just the old fogey stuff, and suddenly they got something they can touch, and they can swing a hammer on it, you just give grandma, grandpa, mom and dad, whoever, about a 5.5 to 10 minute break where they're not chasing children around, running from one thing to the next thing to the next thing.
And while that's happening, they're looking at our table. They're asking questions.
Yeah.
Well, I would like, yes, what I like to do is show you how your head on with it on the stop.
And I've explained all that whenever I was showing. If there was an adult actually interested in paying attention, I would explain all that. I mean, it all happens in minutes. I mean, everything we teach in the class, you can explain in minutes. Just like a quick overview. The hammer strikes, the drawing out, the twisting, the bending, the kick, I mean, all that stuff in less than 5 minutes, you can really show it.
If you're having trouble at home getting the metal to move the way you want it to, you can take a piece of that clay and play with it. But, you know, metal may be a limited supply at your house like it is in mine. But you can use it to hone how you want to do something, how you want to make it work.
And you don't need an ice forge to do it. 5 minutes in the refrigerator.
Yeah. Little refrigerator sitting on the table in my shop, just like it.
Yeah. 5 minutes in a refrigerator. you got something to experiment with.
Stick it in the freezer, you got a wax countertop, and your kitchen table just don't catch you, you good. Clean up after you're done.
I use my anvil. When I'm experimenting at home, I will use my anvil and my main hammer. The hammer I'm gonna be using. Well, that is the demonstration itself. Like I said, I have some clay up here. I have some ice. Easiest way to understand it, I could talk about it all day and show it all day. We seldom actually have it broke out here at the shop. Come on up and play with it. Because if you're gonna try it at the museum, you better be familiar with it before, because there is no blacksmithing class that will get you ready for what it's like to have to reach in and handle metal.
Good job, Doc.